2, 3. Okay. All right, hi everybody. I'm Debbie Krukowski, and
I'm Krysti Reece.
We're from Health Careers. We teach in the ultrasound area, and we have been presenting. We presented at the faculty workshop and did one in the spring as well, and they asked us to come again. Surprise, surprise. And we're happy to be here. Since we did this, we've had some changes, so we'll sort of add them in. We haven't added them in the PowerPoint. I recently spoke at our national conference on soft skills to students, which was really interesting. And so we'll sort of share that with you. We do have something in the middle. We are going to do a little breakout at the very end, if you want to use the back of that, to write down maybe some ideas you can think about of how you could bring this into your classroom as we go. That would be great. We're pretty open and informal, so just stop us if you want to stop us in between. Only with nice things, of course, and we'll move forward. All right? So we're going to take a hard look at soft skills. Soft skills are something that a lot of people, you hear the word, and you don't quite understand what they are. We had an advisory committee because we were addressing this as a national issue in our field. And everybody was talking about what the students needed and this and that. And I said, well, we're adding soft skills. And they all talked about it. We had this great conversation. And at the end, one of the people who were totally engaged came up and said, but exactly what is soft skills? I said, it was everything we were just touching. He goes, you know, I've heard that word, but I couldn't necessarily say what it is. So we're going to talk about what it is and the national dilemma with it and how some publishers are actually blaming universities and colleges for the students coming out without these soft skills and how we can address it. All right, so soft skills are a combination of many things. And they're items that we want every professional to have, whether it be in a healthcare setting or in the business world or in anything. These are things that employers are expecting the students to have as they graduate. So communication, obviously professionalism, perseverance is a big one, adaptability and flexibility, critical thinking, and teamwork. Now we all look at that and say, well, of course, a good hard worker will know these things, and that's what makes them good hard workers. But what they're trying to say is, if they don't know that this is expected of them, maybe their idea of new grads' idea of adaptability and flexibility is a little different than their bosses, because very often we're of different generations, and different generations have different ideas of what's acceptable and what is not. So there is a skills gap in the professional world, and there are some books that we've studied that say there's a national trend for high turnover. Okay, new grads are actually focused on their next job before they've even spent a week at their current new job when they graduate from college. And so they are always thinking long term, and that they're seeing that as something that's hindering them from being rooted in a job and being part of the job and wanting to get in. I would think, oh, it's first job, they're going to be all in. But there's times that, well, I'm only going to work here for a little bit because then I want to go here. All right. In the business world, they say, well, maybe it's because the turnover is so high and they don't expect that they're going to be at the same place for a long period of time. But employers are saying they're noticing that that's an issue. Okay. Lack of respect for authority. Okay. Not understanding the difference of what you can say to your coworker, to what you can say to your supervisor, to your boss, or the president or CEO. The book that we sort of started studying when we first started looking at this, some of the conversations that CEOs were talking about, that someone came up to them at a party, you know, like a Christmas party, and what they said to them, they weren't even intoxicated or anything like that. They were just like, that's so inappropriate for you to say that to me, as far as what should happen in the company and what they think should be done. And so knowing that, you know, chain of commands is really not there in certain age groups. Lack of language appropriateness, knowing what is appropriate to say in a professional conversation versus a conversation with your friend, is sometimes muted. They said the skills gap is real. 92% of senior executives believe there's a gap in skills in the new graduates coming out. And again, they're talking about the traditional, even though we have a mixture, but what we find with our non-traditional students, they also have some skills gaps that are lacking. And how do we as instructors, helping to get them in the workforce, prepare them? It's part of our job. Okay. What we came across was they're hired for their hard skills. They are fired for their soft skills. Okay. So we teach in the ultrasound field. So it's an obvious skill. They need to know how to scan and do ultrasounds and take care of patients. that they know when they graduate from Triton College, they have those skills. So it's an easy fix. Yes, you're a Triton grad, we're going to hire you. What they don't all have is the soft skills. And sometimes those come across on an interview and sometimes they don't. What they say is they always give leeway in an interview that someone is nervous. Like they might not have interviewed well, but oh, you know, they're a graduate of this school and we know they got what they need. And so then once the job comes about, they notice that they don't have that. So they may be great at the skill needed for that job, but their interpersonal, their communication, all those types of things aren't there, and that's what they're getting fired for. Okay, we found that really interesting. These are some statements that people have said. Their communication skills are terrible. Now, we all know that we've heard that if you are born in 1990 or later, you have not known a world without cell phones and computers. Okay, but unfortunately, most of their supervisors do, and they don't understand the role of the phone similar to what they think, and it's not matching. They don't know how to think, learn, and communicate without checking a device. Okay, and we're doing it too. We're starting to pull into that, but you're having a conversation with somebody at work, and they say, I think hold on, and they're stopping and they're looking at their phone and trying to find the right answer. And employers really want them to know how to get to the right answer, maybe without checking their phone. Because what happens when they put it in the World Wide Web and they do a search and there's no specific answer? Then they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what we could do about that. And so they want them to build these critical thinking skills to be able to do that. They don't take personal responsibility or hold themselves accountable. Okay? If you're talking to a young graduate who gets a job in the business world and they leave because, well, their manager is just not. Okay, they just don't know how to organize it. They expect too much. Sometimes they expect me to work through my lunch. Things like that. It's somebody else's fault. Or I was matched up with somebody who was supposed to be training me and they didn't train me appropriately. They would never say, I had trouble with this job. Okay, and take on that ownership. And that's what they're seeing. No sense of self-sacrifice for the greater good. Okay, it's a dog-eat-dog world out there, and you take an area like marketing, and everyone's like, my idea's got to go, and we have to do this. But it is for the greater good of that company, all right? And so sometimes they are so self-centered in proving to their boss that they're well, the boss notices that they're not interacting, they're not sharing, maybe they're stronger in one area than another new hire. And then colleges lack having students interact with the real adults other than just their peers. Krysti, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I can talk later a little bit about how we've addressed that personally as far as within the program and bring outside people in.
Yeah, what they're saying is like you do all these exercises, and it's not just a skills career-based program, any program, and you're teaching them, this is how you write a resume, and this is how you do it, and you're doing it from an educator's perspective. What they're saying is we confine them so much to the books and our lecture and that they need outside people to come in. Now, I know that a lot of us have adjunct faculty for that reason, somebody who's currently working in the field that can give some guidance. And so I think community colleges are a little bit above that. But they say, take people, maybe not even from your field, someone from human resources to come in and speak to your students who are in their last course or close to the second year and say, this is what we expect. Because what a supervisor in a department of whatever area you're graduating in is different than that first person they meet, and that might be the human resources person. So they say if we contain it to just people like us, they won't know that they're going to be interacting with many types of people, and we all know that interaction with people is a skill that we need to be successful.
All right, so now we're going to kind of break down and go through each of those categories that were termed soft skills related to each of the topics. So interpersonal skills is right up there, the communication, okay? And communication, we all know, isn't just me talking, you writing things down. It's you actively listening to my point, to what I'm trying to get across, not sitting there on your phone, on Facebook, looking up every once in a while like we see a lot in our classrooms. We actually have policies related to that in our classroom, which I'll talk about a little bit. But actively listening, okay? Not listening, wait, what? Hold on, listening until I'm done talking to truly absorb the point that's going across. Verbal is clear, that's what I'm doing right now. Nonverbal are all those different cues, okay? When someone's blank staring at you, wide-eyed, I have no clue what you're talking about, okay? Being able to recognize when someone's uncomfortable, okay? What you're saying is making them uncomfortable or not at ease. So just taking all of those different parts of true interpersonal communication and really breaking them down, making sure that they're a strong speaker. So we're not in speech, but making sure that they can get up and present and get their point across. Active listening, again, is kind of something.
And yeah, nonverbal even is just your stance. How do you stand and how do they stand when someone's talking to them? Are they, like Krysti said, looking at their phone? Are they going like this? Like, okay, can I leave now? Are they actually showing a posture that says, what you're saying to me is important and I'm taking it in? That's another area.
Right. And even not being too domineering, making themselves appear too big, which is intimidating in our world to patients for sure. Making sure you just have that presence about you. All right. And that's the gist of interpersonal skills. When we look at email, Paul, you might have to help me decipher this like you did at the faculty presentation. But the biggest thing with email, we've all received them. We have no clue who they are, what class they're in, what assignment they're talking about, because they just put, the message out there like, we know exactly everything that happens in every single class. We do, but, we don't know who KDP is off the top of our head. We might have 5 KDPs in our classes, okay? So it's important that they're very diligent about making sure that their emails are appropriate. Hi, my name is, I am in your DMS 100 course. I was wondering from Module 5, that's very, very descriptive. That will help me understand what they're asking. And then always say, thank you, sincerely, best, warm regards, and their name. So when it comes to just typical problems that we've seen across the board, okay. Typical problems we've seen across the board, no subject. Okay, so just a blank top header on your email. I mean, I don't know about you, but I still like to see just a general question about class or something like that that's going to draw my eye. No name at all. It just comes directly from the student's email. They assume now I have to look what email address even is that from. Maybe it's an outside one, Betty Boop 27 is an example of one of the students. Okay, non-Triton email, which we don't accept anymore. Just general errors, spelling errors in their emails. Okay, using slang in the email. And again, no greeting. So this is a sample email and a very, very real one. I wanted to know when the worksheet is due. I know in class you said when, but I wanted to make sure. That's the part I needed help with the last time. I don't even know what it means. I have a date tonight. And TY.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
But now with us using a Triton student emails, we can look up and see who it is. But we're not only preparing them to communicate with us, we're preparing them to communicate with the outside world and their bosses and their coworkers and anybody in that. And so I know I've said to students you have to tell me who you are. Well, obviously look at my name on the email. We're trying to teach you what to do at all times because your email isn't there. We use the Betty Boop 27. I had a student who graduated 15 years ago. She's a clinical supervisor at one of my sites, and we were talking. I said, well, give me your email and I'll email you. Oh, it's the same one. And I remembered it was Betty Boop. I don't know why. I went, now this is a grown woman who's a clinical supervisor, mother. And I said, you still have Betty Boop, whatever. I didn't remember the number. Yeah. I'm like, oh, you need to change that. Okay. And so even telling your students, once you stop using this Triton, if you want to have a personal one, I love life, that's fine. But also anything professional, get yourself a Gmail, make it something with your name in it is really important.
Right, and I, with this too, what I normally do or how I approach it is the beginning, I'm a little more lenient. Okay, I got your email, I had to do a little research to who you were and exactly what you were talking about. In the future, make sure to include it, and I try and explain why. That I do overall as a class. Hopefully that sticks the first time, but and it doesn't. But in the beginning, then I'll do that, but then after that point, my response is, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are or what you're talking about. And then and they'll respond. Not to be difficult, and I tell them that every time. I'm not trying to be difficult, but people want you to speak appropriately, you're not texting a friend. Okay, so I try to get that across.
I can think back to when I started here at Triton and had no general education coursework, and I took a writing class here at Triton, and the instructor came up and he goes, Deb, you gotta stop writing like you're talking. Okay, now they learned that in English 101. You don't write your research paper as if you're speaking to someone. It's a little different writing a paper to having a conversation, but it's just the same thing here. Now this is our form of communication, and they have to understand the difference between texting and emailing and speaking.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Okay. That's me.
Yes.
Okay. So professionalism. Again, we all have an ultimate goal, whether a student is just taking some general education courses and then deciding what they're doing, or taking 2 years here and transferring, and then in careers, it's a very specific goal. When they graduate, professionalism is expected. Okay, what is professionalism? Timeliness. Okay, we're all trying to be more adaptable to our students and their different lives, but there has to be a place where you say, this wouldn't be accepted in a job. Okay, I understand you're taking 2 buses and walking a mile to get here, and that's why sometimes you're late in class, or you're traveling for 2 hours and it's a bad snowy day, but understand that in a job, that wouldn't be accepted. Especially in health careers, they expect you to be there on time no matter what, and if somebody doesn't show up, the person from the last shift has to stay to cover that. They can't just have everybody walk out of the hospital when no one's there. And so timeliness is important, and so if we practice that in our classroom, with reasons and explaining it, they adapt to it more. You know, I usually do the, okay, but if you're not here by the time I start the lecture, it doesn't matter, you say hi, you greet, you answer a few questions, I consider that late. And so they'll come strolling in, and I always like inform them, like, you know, you come in, not only are you coming in, you're taking your coat off, you're taking off your backpack, you're digging through your backpack. So I tell them, if you are late, I want you outside the door with a pencil in your hand, your backpack, your coat off, where you can come and sit in the first seat, because they, of course, want their seat. It's way in the front. When we take a break, you can move. But I also say, when you are late to someone, not in the midst of class, come up and say, I'm really sorry I'm late. Acknowledge that you knew you were late. And so the instructor in a classroom or your boss understands that you know that that's not acceptable.
One thing we do, too, I think both of us kind of do, is like if someone's consistently late, you just don't write them off.
No.
You talk to them about why are they late, what's going on, and when they explain to you about the bus and the mile walk and all of that, it's helpful if you can well, maybe you need to take an earlier one, or maybe, if possible, you need to make those adjustments in the future.
Yeah, I use mine in my first week of class, coming down River Road, which a lot of students do. There is a train every day between 8:10 and 8:17, so that means you're going to need to get here by 8 o'clock instead of 8:30 at the class time, because that can't be consistently. But it's nice to do it in a way where you're not this big figure telling them how to live their life. And so a lot of times after the second time, I'll just give them a little nudge as they're, you gotta get here on time. And then if they do it again, then it's conversation. So how you present yourself, we don't want to be this big figure telling them what to do. Okay, they have their parents, especially if they're younger students, for that. They're coming here for our guidance, and there's ways to do it without being so strict, but then we also have to do it. Personal responsibility, again, you know, computer, turning things in on the computer. I'm sorry, but my computer went down at 11:02. Well, the assignment's been due for 5 days. Why'd you wait till the last minute? Self-presentation and how they come in and work. Again, students, you know, don't feel like they need to dress up for class, but they don't need their pajamas with rollers in their hair slouching over onto the next student as well. But when they're presenting themselves in a professional manner, they have to understand what the role is. For example, students in healthcare, when they have interviews, very often it's not a fancy place. Okay, it's a hospital. You could walk in with a lab coat and scrubs and they'd be okay with it. But you don't. You dress up a little bit more. But they shouldn't dress up in a suit, okay, and high heels as a woman to go in a health interview. It's not, they're like, where do they think they're going to be working? And so you have to get them what's accustomed to your field or your area and help them with that. Productivity is self-explanatory. Follow through. If somebody asks you something, could you look into this, and you don't, okay, what's the follow through? I'm going to check with you in a week. And then if they don't, say, I told you you had a week, now I'm going to give you a day. and let them know it's your responsibility. Well, I tried and I couldn't find it. Well, then you need to come and tell me or whoever's in your group that you couldn't find it and you need help. Seek out resources to help you get to the next step. And then just having initiative. All right, if you look at the top characteristics, again, deadly interview mistakes, 40% inappropriate attire. Okay, 29% late for the interview. That is really bad. We've had that happen here. And it was because of the River Road train. And the person lived in our area, and I know they know about that train, so it wasn't really an excuse. 6% lack of preparation. Okay, can you know that they've looked up the site, looked up the mission statement, what your goal is at the site? They want to know that. Okay, I've actually interviewed somebody in another place that actually thought they were interviewing at a different place. They got the names mixed up. That's not really good on an interview. Okay, and then poor verbal skills and grammar. So again, we need to let them know that when we have conversations, we're expecting it to be as if you're talking as a professional. Okay, so yes, we have all the different generations and people. I have 5 children and have a couple of everybody and then myself. When I did the talk at the SCMS, it was 2 students, so I couldn't just say, they're on their phone all the time, you don't want to attack. And so I did it more as like, your boss is about 64, okay? And the 64-year-old person doesn't think it's appropriate for you to have their phone in front of you. And so they're all like, oh, so we can't do these kinds of things until all those people die? And I was like, no, that's not true. And so I talked about, well, what is acceptable? Look around in an environment and see, does everybody have their phone out or is it away? What is acceptable? And so different generations have different things, and many of us have multiple generations, different ages, right in the same classroom. And so I always say, why not get the students to help each other out? Like, oh, I would never have known that because that wasn't around when I was here. And then somebody else saying, well, I thought it was okay to write like I text. And getting conversation going so that students can actually help each other and have some peer mentoring. Respectfulness of other positions and beliefs. We have to let them know that it's not acceptable to make some statements in public, okay? And I have to say, you go back 30 years when Archie Bunker was a show that everybody watched. That may have been funny then, it's not too funny now. And what you could have said 30 years ago is not acceptable, all right? And so they have to understand that. Everyone says they are a team player, but do they know what that really means, okay? And explaining what it is. Obviously working together, and then cooperation with a variety of people of different backgrounds. All right, we bought a Christmas tree. Was that 2 years ago?
We started a tradition.
Muslim students, and they came up and said, I don't think I can participate. I said, oh no, you don't need to participate. That's totally fine. And then she came up and she said, but this is just a social activity, right? And I said, yes, but you're not at all. You don't have. And she came, and she is still talking about that experience of just being with her classmates of all different cultures and not making it a Christian thing. It was a give back type of thing, and how I would never have thought that before. And so she shared with what her differences were and what her holiday were, and she was only probably not comfortable doing that until we started talking about different things. And so be aware of everyone's different backgrounds.
All right, so when it comes to critical thinking, that's a huge buzz, of course. We say, oh, we're implementing critical thinking. Our students are critical thinkers. We want people to be critical thinkers. Now, what's happening, or we're noticing as a trend, especially with students or with, I hate to say people of this generation in the workforce, but it truly is a generational thing in the workforce, is that now they're so used to that instant gratification and that instant internet access that they don't know what to do when it fails them, okay? And Deb already touched on it a little bit. We're presented with a problem, first thing they do, internet, Google, search it, WebMD, what do I have, what's going on with me? I'm guilty sometimes of those things too. But, that's the first thing that most people go to, all right? I can't find my answer there, all right? I don't know what the answer is, so I'm going to go ask Deb. Deb, this is the problem, how do I solve it, what's going on? Our students do it all the time. I looked on the internet, I can't find the answer. What's the answer? Like, they want it from another person. Well, maybe the other person says, I don't know. Well, now what do I do? It goes unsolved. I don't know what to do. Okay, so that's the process kind of fails at that point when they don't have that person to reach out to or that source. they're not comfortable enough a lot of times to go to a book. We have a plethora of books.
Resources.
Look up 3 or 4. That's what we normally tell our students. Oh, I can't find the answer. All right. Or I don't agree with your answer. Okay, well then find it in 3 or 4 spots. And we'll have a conversation.
Even in the presentation for assessment, they were talking about you can't just say teach the students to critically think, okay, or demonstrate critical thinking. You have to look at your program or your course and say what would demonstrate critical thinking in your course. Instead of saying critical thinking, what is the activity or the action that shows critical thinking and how do we measure it? And so we have to stop just using critical thinking and think of ways to make them critically think and explain that it is. Sometimes they'll say, oh, that question was so hard. And I'll say, well, that was a 2-part question. It wasn't factual. It was you knew this fact and then use this fact to make it. I said, and then it's going to be 3-part questions and then 4-part questions as you progress in the topic that we're teaching. And so again, it's not just the word critical thinking, but what actions can we teach them to do it?
Right, and we did a couple of our courses, what we've done, especially in lab settings, it's easier for us to do. I put a question on the board or an image or a situation, and I talk about it. Tell me what your answer is. And a lot of times, there's not one right answer, and they hate that because it makes them think beyond just the concrete fact. But that's true critical thinking. So I've implemented that in just about, I think, every one of our labs. We're doing more of it. What they don't like is that little pause in there. Like they want, again, instant gratification, instant feedback, a correct 100% answer. In life, that's just not realistic. So trying to just implement those things, I think, and activities has really helped our students. Flexibility, adaptability, and perseverance. So flexibility, again, that's different meaning to everyone. What they think is being flexible, oh, okay, I'll stay an hour, versus their employer saying, can you just be a little flexible with your schedule? We're short right now. We need someone on the weekends. They're like, no, weekends are mine. I go fishing on the weekends. I go camping on the weekends. Sorry. Understanding the importance of that, especially in the workforce, that you have to be flexible with your time. You have to be flexible with your schedule in today's world especially. And you also have to be flexible in your duties. Okay, so sometimes you're going to have to do a little extra work, whether it's in your job description or not. Adaptability, everybody hates change. Okay, so nobody likes change. Nobody likes new policies, new procedures, new way of doing things, a change of systems.
Well, I'm sure you've all had a student who said, I've never not gotten an A. So, it's your fault that I didn't get an A. And you're like, well, this is different. This is a little bit more thought processing. It's a higher level of comprehension. You are working 2 jobs and you're a mother and you're traveling a long distance to get here. You don't have the same time as when you took one class at a time. And so again, sometimes sharing your idea with them or saying, well, why do you think this isn't working? What do you think is the difference? Instead of just saying, well, that's your fault, not mine. And understanding it, and also trying to get them to adapt to new situations.
One of our courses, what I've done is I do half traditional, half flipped, and it's still a work in progress. I'm going to say that. Yes. This semester, a little bit more work than I thought, because I thought I had it down before, but now everything has to change and evolve. But I do a traditional day. I talk, I lecture, use PowerPoints, and then I use a non-traditional flip day. So they have stations, they have models they have to use. I use the anatomage table, it's an anatomy table, a worksheet that has to be completed. So they have multiple different things that they have to do, watch a video, just to kind of target every different type of learner. Some people love it, and some hate it, because I've always been lectured to, I've always sat here, I've always read it out of a book, that's how I've always done it. I don't like this busy work. What they don't realize is maybe the person next to them learns better by what they perceive as busy work. So being flexible, I call it playing along. I'm like, just play along with me. And then by the end of the semester, they love it, the interactiveness. And they also build friendships and relationships and better communication skills along the way, whether they realize it or not. So those are just a couple things. Perseverance is a hard thing to teach. Okay, so that desire to push through. Okay, especially I think that it's easier in DMS or radiology or very focused career paths, because they see the end result is I'm going to be a sonographer, I'm going to be an x-ray tech, so I know my 100% goal every single time, and that's a career goal. Where if it's a general education course, you know, I'm not going to do good, I've never been good at English, I'm just going to do the bare minimum, I don't have that push through.
This might be a place where you could bring someone in from a field that might be an area where your students would be looking towards to get that, you know what, I struggled and look where I am now, I'm successful, I'm happy, I'm growing, and let them know that there is, that hard work does pay off.
Right, yep.
So we made some changes in our curriculum. It's now the second year of the changes. Faculty were very aware that the sites through our advisory committees were coming back saying that students were missing some things that we thought, I can't believe they would act like that in their jobs, but they were. Advisory committee gave us suggestions. Human resource professionals were turning to us and saying, what can you do? We started looking into these books of people talking about soft skills and said, they're blaming the colleges. It's the college or the university's fault. These students are coming out ill-prepared. And we don't want that. And so that's placing the blame, not owning up, which we say we go back to some of those beginning slides that they're saying our students aren't doing. And so we decided that we needed to address it. So we started thinking about it. Where are we going to start? So we started looking at our beginning class that taught some things similar to communication, and obviously in there was patient care for us and things like that, and said, okay, this is before they got in the field or in a higher level of comprehension. Where could we put it in the curriculum after they have more knowledge with us, more experience with patients, but even just in a skill set, that they can actually think about application of these things. It's great to practice saying hi to someone and introducing and do it, but when you do it with someone you don't know or you've had the experience, you can understand a little better. So we went and decided that we were going to look at some courses we can change. So we adjusted our first class to match the second one that we were going to change. So we took a beginning class and a last year class. We put more real world examples specific to their field. And this doesn't have to be a career program. This could be an English 101. When would you be using this type of a letter? When would you be writing something about this? Okay? Clearing up any misinterpretation, why things need to be the way they do, what's the purpose. I always know that, you know, when you tell anybody, well, the reason why I'm asking you to do this is because of this, they're more willing to help because they see the end result. And then perception versus reality. Okay, what they perceive. Krysti, didn't somebody say something
my
like
job
no one would ever act like that?
Yeah, there's an activity that we do on one of the courses that we'll talk about shortly where we kind of just have an open forum. I asked them to give me a clinical situation that they thought was terrible and how they would react or what they think of it, and then we talk about it as a group. And when I would never act that way. One of them was an example of a sonographer that was short with a patient, didn't acknowledge them immediately, and there's a very long story behind it. But as I was listening, I'm like, okay, I mean, yeah, it was probably, it's not an unrealistic occurrence, but there's like, I would never act that way. And I said, but would you? What if you had a bad day? What, were they rude to the patient? Well, no. They just didn't answer them immediately, or they weren't smiling or killing them with kindness. Okay, they got their test done. They weren't killing them with kindness. They weren't rude. This patient didn't leave mad. Well, no. I said, okay. I said, now I'm not saying that all that was, appropriate or that it was a perfect interaction, but how could you say that you would never act that way?
I think also we all have students who you tell them something, you explain, you go through the syllabus, and their perception of what you just said is totally different than yours. Okay? Like, well, I didn't know that's what you meant. And so you have to sort of give explanations, share why it's necessary, and that's really helpful. So we started setting, with the new building, we started having our students come in uniform, as if they were going to a clinical site. I know the culinary arts, they wear their, whether they're working in a kitchen as if they were working in a real kitchen. And so it set the tone as if we were in a professional environment. And so we don't expect unprofessional behavior when they're in this attire. And so we started it in the lab. Some of the students are like, should we wear our uniforms all the time? I'm like, well, no, we're not going to control everything you do. But we set it up as if it's a hospital, okay? And when you want help from your friend, you're like, Nancy, come here. You're going to say, do you have a moment? Could you come over? And we're trying to get them to interact as if they're in a real life setting, okay? We have critical thinking activities. Putting students on the spot, what would you do? It's the thing they hate the worst of anything. You know, it's like a true and false questions are similar to on the spot. Like, well, maybe if you thought about, no, is that statement true or is that statement false? This is being put on the spot. What would you do next? Oh, no, that would burn the house down. That's not a good thing to do. What you would want to do next is this. And so sort of talk them through some ideas. And then student-driven task testing. All right, and so the students are driving what they need help with, what they want to work on, what they've seen, what they're questioning, and going from there. So we decided that we were going to develop a seminar course. So we had our DMS 106 beginning. They've never seen a patient, don't know anything about anything. And then we have 144. They've been in the clinical rotation for at least 60 days, 50 days by then. They've had some situations. They know. They've worked in that environment. And so we decided that we'd look at what was lacking in the graduates from the feedback and where we could put it here that it actually made sense, because otherwise you're just telling them. You know, we've all seen people walking through the hallways pretending like, you know, their patient is blind. We have them do activities as freshmen, but it's much different when the person really is having trouble walking or talking. So we wanted to do that. So we wanted to focus on right actions and build their skills for when they graduate. So we have a simulation lab, a wonderful, beautiful building. We love it all. That's me sitting in the hallway there, just shooting the breeze. We have a simulator that we can actually turn on, and it speaks to us. Now, it does a lot of wonderful things. It has heart attacks and things like that, but that's not soft skills. That's not what we're working on, okay? What we're working on is how do they interact. So we took 5 students up at a time into the nursing lab. I went in the hallway, and I was the patient. And so the voice was coming out of the mannequin. Okay, and they had to go up and introduce themselves. Hi, you know, I'm taking you. Who are you? And I didn't hello anything back. You look a little young. Get somebody else in here and see how do they react to that, because this is real life situations. Okay. At first I thought these guys have been in the hospital for a while. They're gonna think this is so boring and one of those just busy situations, and they loved it. Number one, they didn't do as great as I thought they'd do because they've been with patients, and they were like, so what we did was after we sat around and said, well, what did you see that this person did? And we sort of talked about everything. And somebody said, you know, I had a patient say that to me. And you know what really worked? And they shared their situations with each other. And it was quite, and they wanted to do it again. So I was like, okay, they weren't bored. It was sort of fun. And they actually said, it really helped me. Also, when you go into the professional world in any way, whether it's a hospital or, you know, in the business world, sometimes it's embarrassing to ask questions. To a coworker that you don't know them and you don't know if they're going to say, she doesn't know how to do this to the boss, right? And so how can you work through those situations and critically think and think of an answer without maybe, and having a safe place to ask. I figure while they're here, this is our safe environment and we should provide it for them.
All right, so our afterthoughts. Of course, we created this course, so it was the first time we ran it. Our thoughts were personally, we felt there wasn't as much of a connection as we wanted. They weren't connecting exactly what we were trying, the point we were trying to get across, the ethical side of things, the professionalism, or the communication side of things. We were, again, kind of caught off guard that first time we ran that simulation and their interactions, knowing that they had been in the clinical setting. They also ended up with an inflated confidence, and by inflated, I mean inflated. They thought that they knew better than sonographers that had been doing it in the field, that I will never be that way, I will never do things that way.
They didn't see it as that. They were just coming to us saying, so-and-so did this, and can you believe it? And so their perception here was, we are better than all of them.
Right.
And we were like, whoa, put the brakes on. We cannot have them going into clinical and be like, what are you doing that about? Mrs. K and Mrs. Reece, that is ridiculous and you should never do that. So we started getting nervous about 3/4 of the way through the course. As we talked about issues they saw and they were sharing with us, they saw them as the judges. And so we had to dial it back a little and put them back in their place. And
definitely dial things down on that.
We got a little nervous.
We did. Definitely, and they had this idealistic mentality from it too, which we really didn't think was going to happen, to where like everything is rainbows and butterflies, but this is also concrete, and this is how it's done every single time. They lost their flexibility, which is the opposite of what we were trying to do. So it was a learning experience on every end. Now this semester, we're to the future now, to future adjustments. So this is our second year of running it. More real life scenarios. So now just instead of doing that first interaction with the patient, they actually do it at the beginning. They fumbled again. Okay, so that wasn't a unique situation. I was the person talking on the other side. They didn't know what they were walking into. We had the open forum where we could all discuss experiences at clinicals, and you know, similar finding first lab. Now we're going to do it at the end again. So I said, now you guys know you have work to do. You know, you have to be more thoughtful, more conscious of the things. So we're going to see, that's one thing for sure, adding more at the end to see and kind of recap. Throughout the lab too now, though, I'm doing that more often and making sure that they're interacting their scenarios a little bit more. Include improper techniques. So this is the right way to do it. That's what we were telling them. Only the right way. Okay? This is the wrong way to do it. There's a right, a wrong, and sometimes what you have to do for certain reasons. So kind of explaining that it's not just black and white. You have to understand the shades of gray. So including that a little bit in our conversations. I have dialed back those ethical conversations a little bit, or foreshadowed them with, we're not here to make judgment, and made it very clear that things happen, and you know, we want to talk about those ethical situations, but also address them not from a judgmental standpoint.
Yeah, it was like they were going to the principal to get somebody in trouble.
Yeah.
You know, they were coming with these things like, wait till I tell you this, and they thought they'd have our full support. We couldn't do that. We had to say, well, I can see where that could happen sometimes, because otherwise they were, you know, thinking the people they were with in a job weren't great.
Right. Including guest speakers. So we already did this a little bit with certain classes, but starting to, we actually started a senior send-off day last year, which isn't on here, to where we had Mariana Desmond, if you know who she was my predecessor. She came in and interviewed our students. They had to hand her the resume. It was a realistic interview.
Know this person. We found that if you did the practice ones and they know you, it's not the same as having a stranger do it. And so we had people do that.
Yep, so we had her do that. We had Natalie, one of our adjuncts that they didn't know at the time. She pretended she was a radiologist, and they had to go present a case to her and talk her through the case and what they were seeing and verbalize everything to her. Another was sonographers that are at our sites, and again, they don't really know them. They had to actually perform the skill in front of them, and then they got critique and feedback. And then they had their strengths and weaknesses with us. So just throughout the time here at Triton, this is what we've identified as your strength and weakness, and this is what you need to work on moving forward. And most of those,
and they were seniors about to graduate, so they were all graduating. It was all positive, but it was saying, you know, this is one area that I think with experience, all turn on the positive, not on a judgment way, and it went really well.
Yeah, most of them ended in tears and these hugs. So it was good overall. And then include more clinical input. So push for more active role of HR, department supervisors. We definitely are pushing more for evaluations on our students more overall in the clinical setting, just to kind of see, has there been that improvement?
Right. And a non-career program, this could be somebody in the business field. It doesn't matter what part. If it's anything, any general education course is, you know, lifelong learning and all that type of information that they could share. Yes, you know, somebody told me this 20 years ago, and I didn't know what the heck they were talking about either, but now I'm in the workforce, and this is what I see, and it is a benefit, so they can understand the, you know, the benefit of things. So assessment, we are seeing the difference in our graduate surveys, our employer surveys that we've had to do for our accrediting body before assessment came around, and we're asking specific questions now, not just, are you happy with them? Did they perform their skill? Did they pass their test? We're asking specific questions on soft skills. What is their communication? Are they interacting? Do you see them understanding the room for growth in the field and things like that? And so we're getting input from that. Our advisory reactions to changes were very positive because we've had one since we implemented the first class even just that one that we didn't think went that great made a huge difference in this clinical sites or the employers. We have a little bit of variety. They're not all our clinical sites. Gave us feedback that, yes, we're seeing a difference coming out. And so it's not just us telling them what's right or wrong. It's understanding where they're coming from, okay? And so it's a combination. So communication from us to them and them to us. It's not a one-sided, this is what you will do. Again, we're not their parents. Accountability. If you make them accountable for things in the classroom, they'll be accountable for things in their profession, okay? And so everyone likes the nice teacher who's like, oh, don't worry, if it's late, don't do, just give it to me eventually. It's not going to teach them accountability for that student who, stayed home from work because they had to get this project done, and then another student said, oh, I couldn't do it. And you're like, oh, that's okay. So that's being accountable as well. We could do that in any kind of situation. Time management, again, are we managing our time well? Are we modeling what that is? Because that teaches them that, okay? And then critical thinking, not only saying you got to critically think. These are the things that show critical thinking. I'm expecting you to be able to solve a problem if I give you X, Y, and Z. Okay, I'm not talking math because I couldn't solve that problem. And then professionalism, again, how do you address people? I think sometimes we have students of different ages, great ages, and they're all there for career programs, common goal, and they don't understand that they can't speak to someone a certain way because that's how they talk to their friends. And I'm like, that might have been very insulting for that student. Or sometimes they come in, they say stuff out loud, before they sit in their chair. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah. So I say later, do you understand what culture this person's from and that was probably really inappropriate and she made her feel really uncomfortable? I didn't even think of that. And so you gently do it. You're like, you're not going to be saying that is unacceptable, I'm kicking you out of class. You just give them a little gentle nudge to say, think about things, act in a professional manner, even in the classroom. And we're really doing that in the laboratory. And so it's a combination of what we can display, what we can share with them, and then bringing those outside sources in. And how can you bring it to any single classroom these things can be taught. All right, so how can we improve our soft skills in our classrooms? So, of course, we're always going to have some kind of a little brainstorming activity. I have some papers on the center of the table, and you can sort of brainstorm with somebody at the table. They may be from a different field, and that's okay because we all bring different things to the table. And there is, when I Googled millennials, there's everybody on the wall, nobody interacting, nobody talking to each other, and they're totally okay with that, okay? My child actually texted me over the weekend and said, are you home? And I was sitting in the family room. I have a really big open room, can't miss me, and I didn't text back. And he came over thinking, Mom, I was asking if you're home. I'm like, how about if you come out and say, Mom, are you home? Or, I'm really hungry. Okay, that's nice. Okay, but this is what they're doing, is they're texting, okay, as their way of communicating. And unfortunately, you can't do that. In a lot of jobs, they don't allow you to have your phone, unless you're in a computer type of setting. I have a daughter who lives in California, and she brings her dog to work, and it sits on her lap all day as she works on the computer, and she can pet it. I'm like this, what? I'm like, huh? And she's just like, oh yeah, And I was like, oh, all right. Came home this week for something, for an emergency, for a family member, and I said, oh, what's happening with work? Oh, I'm working. We're communicating, we're talking, but they're not even seeing each other. So it is definitely a, profession situation, but in the majority of people. Have you ever gone to the doctor's office and checked in, and the person at the front desk, again, that's more administrative, not health careers, and they're on the phone, texting while they're talking to you? I'm just appalled by that. I went to my doctor's office recently, and the nurse was in the lab on her phone. There was a computer there, so it wasn't work. And she was texting, and I said, oh, excuse me. Oh, hold on one second. And she was sending a text to someone. I'm like, now how can you keep your head? Like, that's just not appropriate. And so we're all falling into it. I fall into it at times as well. But we need to sort of mention, like, this might not be acceptable in this situation, so that they can say, I've never been told that. What we do, we text or email our students in the middle of the day, and if they respond back immediately, I know that their phone is not locked up in their locker, and they're not allowed to have their phones with them. And they catch one person per semester because then they all tell each other. But I'm like, hey, when you get a chance, can you email me back? And boom, hi, what's up, Miss K? I'm like, Why is your mom? How did you get my email so fast?
I've done one better and called the clinical site and they answer the phone. I'm like, hey, I just got your email back right away. What are you doing? Are you on break? They're like, no. I'm like, why do you have your phone on you? So I literally caught them in the act.
Yeah. So if you want to keep, come up with maybe 2 activities that you might be able to introduce, bringing some type of soft skill, communication, professionalism, anything. It doesn't have to be a career tech issue. How don't you bring into your classroom as a simple activity that they don't even know you're doing it? And that's it. Thank you for your time. Questions? Yes.
Are these available for us?
Are these available?
We can make it
We
available.
can make it available.
Available the PowerPoint?
Yeah.